If I were Mongolian, I'd have a prime minister that provides a website called open-government.mn, where draft legislation is shared with the public, selected legislation, before even being submitted to Parliament. But I'm not Mongolian, I'm an American. If I were British, I'd not only have an e-petitioning website on the Prime Minister's actual website, I'd have a civil service that just last week was given policy direction on how they could participate online and therefore truly have permission to participate with us online as part of their job. If I were Japanese, I'd actually have the third Prime Minister that was so bold to address me in first person in his weekly email newsletter. But I'm not, I'm an American. If I were from Queensland, Australia, I'd have a state that had a civic engagement policy, that supported an E-Democracy policy, that supported an actual E-Democracy unit. I'll give $100 to anybody who can find one state employee across the entire United States whose job it is to help government agencies interact with the public online. Find me one civil servant. They support all the different ministries across the Queensland state government as they seek input from the public online. Call it a democracy portal. In fact, Korea also has an e-people democracy portal, apparently world class. I had the honor about a month ago to speak to about 500 federal and state webmasters here in the United States. I mentioned that the US needs what I call democracy.gov. We need a site that helps us navigate authoritatively democracy from the bottom on up. I received a very polite email from someone in the State Department who actually said there actually is a democracy.gov website, but as part of our propaganda arm, well, they didn't say propaganda arm, we can't promote it within the borders of the United States. Poland has a freedom of information law that requires not just access to information or process to request it, it actually requires dissemination of information. In a specific case, is putting local government spending information online. But the mother of them all, the mothership of government-hosted e-democracy is Estonia. If I were Estonian, since 1998, I would have had the opportunity to use a website called Today I Decide. Sort of like a deliberative petition site. Citizens can make proposals, there's a process for proposing amendments and voting, and then finally, on the government website, the proposals then are forwarded to the various ministries for response. Responses aren't required, but the site is now in version 2. The European Union just funded an open source solution to allow this Today I Decide site to be now shared with multiple governments. They also find out that in their parliament, they're so bold, they actually self-publish the salaries of all managers on up, assistant managers on up in the parliament itself on the website. They have a system called X-Road or Crossroad, where they take their little state ID card with a little chip on it, you stick it in your computer, put in your PIN code, and you can see the private data held about you from about 75 different government databases, from the electronic version of your passport to when it's been accessed as well. And you had a right to ask, why was my information accessed? And you had a path to correct incorrect information about you. Maybe 50 years of communism helped them realize that they needed to use these tools to give their citizens rights and transparent access into government. There's also an e-cabinet system. They use interactive video to do their cabinet meetings when they can't all meet in person, and it's supported by an online system, and documents in that system are available. But even more radical, they now have a document register that as civil servants draft documents, like from the very beginning, they're actually registered in a system and available online. It may be that to be a true democracy, it's not going to be what do we ask government for and to be put online or to ask documents. It'll be that everything will be online unless the law says otherwise. To me, that's where we need to move. So as Americans, or whatever country you're from, we need to ask ourselves why government does not encourage more democratic participation online. Mika mentioned the Rebooting Democracy book, and so I have one sentence I'll read out of here. Government websites don't have sidewalks, newspaper racks, public hearing rooms, hallways, or grand assemblies. There are no public forums or meeting places in the heart of representative democracy online. Now, it might be fine that we have blogs, that the media sites have interactivity, that campaigns for e-advocacy are going crazy. But if we cannot interact within the framework of government, something we all own, governments which are supposed to mediate the conflicts in society, provide a little decorum in terms of like a hearing, we're in big trouble, and we need to figure out how to allow our government to actually help convene us in their official processes of democracy. So, a little background. I used to work in state government in Minnesota, helped create the first portal back in 1995. Before that, actually, while I was working for state government, I started a project called E-Democracy, Minnesota E-Democracy. In 1994, it was the world's first election information website. People kept talking when the election was over from the right and the left. And so I basically had a 2-year experience of being government by day and citizen by night. I shoveled lots and lots of information during the day. That was great. But I experienced the absolutely transformative nature and the power of the two-way internet. And now E-Democracy focuses at the local level, so come to the next session and I'll tell you about my neighborhood forum where my neighbors and a couple hundred of them are building up democracy right at the very local level. Well, I left the state government in '97 and I've managed to speak in 27 different countries. I've met people involved with most of the projects that I mentioned before, and I have a few lessons I'd like to share. These are very rare examples. The best practices are not being shared. There's almost no investment happening in E-Democracy from the government side anywhere in the world. Where it does happen, it's important, but we need to spread that. For things to become universal, the honest truth is that those in power will not open themselves up unless they're required to. Enlightened self-interest just isn't going to do it. We need to think about executive orders, rules, legislation at the state and national level. I'll give some examples in a moment. But perhaps even more importantly now, citizens and people, we need to express a demand. We need to articulate specific ideas and needs. This conference theme is an example of some new rising interest in the United States. The Knight Commission on the Information Needs of Local Communities in a Democracy. It's another kind of bubbling up where we're beginning to say, you know, maybe this e-campaign should continue after November 5th, after November 4th. The U.S. is a leader, and when I present overseas, in e-politics. We are #1 at making noise and raising money. Making noise and raising money. But there's a fundamental mismatch. Is that representative democracy is fundamentally based on geography. Yet most of our expression politically is very much in a national scope. So anybody who represents anyone at the state and local level on down, or even members of Congress, have a very difficult time saying, those are my citizens, my constituents interacting. And so there's a lot of disconnect between the public interactivity and agenda setting in the real world of government. So a couple things. We need our candidates for president, governor, on down to make serious commitments toward E-Democracy before Election Day. Patrick Duvall in Massachusetts, Andrew Cuomo when he ran for AG in New York, both made some E-Democracy promises. And that's really, really important to get them to be specific. But once the election is over, you have 6 months to move before the Borg absorbs the new folks in the next administration. You really have to get those executive orders drafted that you want to kind of slip in or whatever it is, legislative amendments, get them moving now. So some ideas for what we might put into legislation and other things. Just a few ideas. You can go online. I have a slide somewhere. Someone can put that up. Go to stevenclift.com and you'll find links to lots of different articles. So #1, we need updated open meeting laws. It shouldn't be optional to put a public meeting notice online. It should be that all public meetings at all levels must be announced on the internet. And not only announced, but so should the agendas and the minutes and the handouts. They should be online the moment they're shared with anyone. When the staff sends it to the city council member, it shouldn't, it might have to say a week before the meeting. That's the moment it should be on the public website, and that should be in the law. And we should require that all public meetings be digitally recorded. Audio is fine, webcasting is okay, but I'm talking about those 7-person meetings in a small group where there's 1 person in the audience and 3 committee members or whatever it is. We need to get just simple audio recordings. #2, we need to invest in e-democracy tools in government, right? One idea, e-notification. No matter, it doesn't change what's public or private, but if you can provide citizens timely access to information, they can do something about it. Google alerts, essentially, for government information as it's released, based on interest as well as place. Geography is essential. #2, we need a version of public hearings online. It's kind of a rough idea, but imagine 24 hours to 48 hours after a public meeting, an in-person hearing, allow people to submit their own testimony with a sense of decorum, real names perhaps. and allow people to rate the testimony so that the cream rises to the crop. Because clearly, elected officials and others aren't going to have time to read everything, so you need to have some process to bring it up. That should be within the official process of committee meetings. We need more than blogs or online surveys, but I will mention that I've heard that the Paperwork Reduction Act essentially says that if a federal agency is going to ask more than 7 people a question, they got to get OMB permission. That's why you don't see online surveys on government websites. That's the first executive order that I think we need to do, is make sure that simple federal agencies can actually ask questions on their websites. We need more projects like the Open House Project with the Sunlight Foundation that's bringing our talents as citizens and as whether they're a technical expert or others to do those electronic barn raisings that Clay Shirky talked about yesterday. I think it's an embarrassment that we have to rely on scrapers like GoTrack.us, a wonderful site, but that we don't have more national and state legislatures that are simply putting their data out there in XML. And then finally, we need to connect the interventionists. We need to go to dowire.org/US. If you, from a nonpartisan perspective, even you hard-nosed e-politicers, people in government, media, if you want to change things for all, if you actually believe that we need to open up the democratic system for all, let's talk to each other. And Tom Steinberg is here. He's helping out with a similar version in the UK, where there's about 150 people trading notes every day about sort of different E-Democracy projects. And it's a long haul, but they're there. So to conclude, millions and millions of people are moving their lives online. They're becoming fundamentally interactive. Government must be able to come to us online, whether they're civil servants or formal processes, as well as incorporate those things within their own online presence. They must be able to listen. We need an investment in how they can listen and understand us and engage us. And our generation, or generations, I guess, that are here, we have an opportunity and really an obligation to use these tools to fundamentally make democracy work better. And I think that's our challenge as we move forward. And we got to quit pushing that delete button on democracy. Thank you.
Thank you.